Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into, well, a relationship that's maybe not always front page news, but it's got this huge amount of history, economic connection,
Hmm,
and future potential too.
definitely. We're talking about India and Kenya.
Exactly, India and Kenya. And, the source material we've looked at really lays out this intricate connection.
It really does. It's fascinating how these two countries, so far apart geographically, developed such deep ties. It's a story built over centuries, really shaped by, global forces, and it's still evolving.
Right. So our mission here in this deep dive is to basically walk through these sources. They give a really detailed look at the history, the commercial links,
Hmm.
and we want to pull out the key bits of knowledge.
Yeah, get to the heart of it. How did this all start? What does it actually look like today?
And crucially, why does it even matter, in the bigger picture of international relations?
Well, it's a great example, isn't it, of how things like historical migration, formal government deals, money flows, people just connecting,
How?
how all that weaves together.
Yeah, it forms this complex, lasting relationship. It's definitely more than just trade numbers.
Much more.
Absolutely. So think of this as your sort of fast track to getting genuinely clued up on this specific but surprisingly complex topic. It's a story, like you said, rooted in history, driven by trade and investment for sure, and clearly looking towards the future.
Okay, let's jump in.
Where do we start? History seems like the place.
Absolutely. To really get the current relationship, you have to understand the foundations. And that means looking back at Kenya under British rule.
Right, starting way back in 1895 as a protectorate, then a colony.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that colonial context is, well, it's fundamental to understanding how people from India first came to Kenya in large numbers.
Yeah, and this is where that first layer starts forming. But it wasn't like people just decided to move there, was it? The sources are pretty clear on this.
No, not at all. It wasn't a spontaneous thing. The significant Indian presence there initially was because they were deliberately brought over by the British.
Why? What was the reason?
Well, the British Empire was huge, right? And they often moved populations around to serve the needs of different parts of the empire. Indians were specifically recruited and brought to East Africa for skilled work and trade skills.
So it was tied directly to the colonial project itself.
Precisely. Like building the Uganda Railway, that was a massive project, needed skilled labor the British couldn't easily find locally. But it wasn't just railway workers. It was also administrators, clerks, artisans, merchants, a whole range of skills.
So it was really a calculated part of the colonial machine, the economic strategy, not just people seeking opportunity on their own, at least not at first.
Exactly right. That laid the groundwork for the Indian diaspora community in East Africa. Now, if we fast forward a bit, India gets independence in 1947.
Okay, but Kenya was still a British dependency then.
It was. But India didn't just wait around. They moved pretty quickly to set up their own official diplomatic relations with the territory of Kenya.
That seems quite proactive for a brand new country. So they didn't just start from scratch when Kenya became independent.
Not entirely. The source points out there was already some structure in place. The British had an office, the Commonwealth General's Office, in Kenya.
Ah,
Okay, so India kind of built on that existing framework, used those connections the British had set up to establish its own independent diplomatic presence, even before Kenya got its independence in 1963.
that's interesting. It's sort of continuity even through the shift from colonial rule to independence.
Yeah. And then, 1963, Kenya becomes independent.
And what was the situation with the Indian community in Kenya at that point? How large was it?
The source says around 2% of the total Kenyan population, which, might not sound massive.
But probably quite significant in terms of their role.
Exactly. A well-established community, been there for decades. And the sources really highlight their role today. They describe them as not only economically well off, but also acting as an important bridge.
An important bridge. Let's unpack that a bit. What does that mean practically? How does an economically successful diaspora community act as a bridge?
Well, think about it. First, you've got the personal ties, right? Family connections, cultural links back to India, even after generations in Kenya, that creates this natural, informal network.
Okay, the human connection.
Then there's the economic side. As the source says, they're well off. Many are involved in business, trade, investment within Kenya. They have capital, they have local know-how, established networks inside Kenya.
So they're plugged into the Kenyan economy.
Exactly. But because of their origins, they also understand the Indian side, the business culture, the networks there. This unique position lets them connect people, identify opportunities, navigate the bureaucracy, stuff that might be harder for outsiders.
Right, they can bridge the cultural gap and the business gap.
Precisely. They have the trust, potentially the capital, the understanding of both sides. They can be advisors, partners, intermediaries. It makes doing business across borders just easier.
So it's like providing both the soft infrastructure,
Yeah.
the trust, the understanding, and maybe even some of the hard infrastructure like business networks and capital.
That's a great way to put it. Their economic success makes them key players within Kenya, which naturally positions them to help bring in trade and investment from India. They're a really powerful, non-governmental part of the bilateral relationship. It complements the official stuff.
That really clarifies that bridge idea. It's
Ah,
not just about shared heritage, it's an active economic function.
Definitely. And understanding that role is, I think, key to grasping the unique flavor of the India-Kenya relationship.
Okay. But as you said, it's not just about the diaspora. The relationship has been formalized. The sources talk about commercial diplomacy.
Yes, moving beyond those diaspora links, there's this whole layer of formal agreements and structures. The source calls it a decent trade-based relationship.
And this seems to have started quite early on, relatively speaking.
It did. A big step was the trade agreement back in 1981. That was significant. It set out a clear framework, a commitment from both governments to actually promote and regulate trade.
And a key part of that 81 agreement was giving each other most favored nation status. What exactly does MFN mean in practice?
Okay, so MFN status, it's a core principle in international trade. You hear it a lot with the WTO. Basically, if India gives MFN status to Kenya, any trade advantage India gives to its best trading partner.
Like a lower tariff.
Yeah, exactly. Or simpler customs rules. That advantage automatically has to be given to Kenya too. And vice versa. If Kenya gives a great deal to, say, Germany, it has to give that same deal to India.
So it's about fairness, non-discrimination.
Yeah.
You promise not to treat them worse than your most favored partners.
That's the essence of it. It creates predictability for businesses, makes trade more attractive because you know you're getting a fair shake compared to others. It signals a real commitment to growing trade together.
Got it, a solid foundation. And then just a couple of years later, 1983, they set up a Joint Trade Commission.
Yes, the JTC. Another important step to sort of institutionalize things, its specific job, the source says, was to promote bilateral trade.
And what do these commissions actually do? Do they just meet and talk?
Well, they involve high-level officials, trade ministries, finance, foreign affairs. They meet periodically to, review how trade's going, look for new opportunities, try to sort out any problems businesses are facing, coordinate policies, basically keep the economic relationship moving forward.
Like a dedicated steering group for trade.
Exactly. And it's not just history. The source mentions the 7th meeting of this JTC happened in February 2015.
So it's an ongoing thing, still relevant nearly 4 decades later.
Shows real continuity. Yeah, it's a mechanism they keep using. And importantly, at that 2015 meeting, they weren't just looking back. They presented identified themes of bilateral cooperation for the future.
So they were looking ahead, being strategic about where to focus next.
Exactly. Pinpointing specific sectors where they saw the most potential for working together more closely. It shows they're actively trying to shape the direction of the partnership.
Okay, so let's dig into those themes from 2015. What specific sectors did they identify?
The source lists a few key ones. Infrastructure was highlighted as a key area. Then also agriculture, horticulture, and mining activities.
Infrastructure makes sense. It's fundamental everywhere. Why specifically important for India and Kenya working together, do you think?
Well, for Kenya, like many growing economies, getting the infrastructure right, roads, rail, power, ports, even digital links, is absolutely critical for economic growth, for trade, for attracting investment.
Sure.
And for India, well, India has developed a lot of expertise and capacity in building big infrastructure projects. So it's a natural fit. Indian engineering firms, construction companies see opportunities in Kenya. Kenya needs the infrastructure. India has companies that can help build it.
A clear convergence of interest there. Okay, so those were the future focus areas. What about the actual trade happening around that time? What goods were flowing back and forth?
The source gives us a breakdown. India was exporting mainly pharmacy products, steel, and power transmission equipment to Kenya.
Okay, so manufactured goods, pharmaceuticals, industrial equipment.
Pretty much. Finished goods, processed materials, technical stuff. Things that support Kenya's healthcare, construction, energy sectors.
And what was Kenya exporting to India?
Soda ash, vegetables, tea, leather products, and metal.
Right, that sounds more like raw materials, agricultural products, maybe semi-processed goods. Soda ash is a mineral, right?
Exactly, extracted mineral. Then you've got farm produce like vegetables and tea, leather, which is processed hides, and metal probably means ores or bulk metal.
So this trade pattern, India sending manufactured goods, Kenya sending commodities. What does that tell us about the relationship?
It's a fairly common pattern, actually, between economies at different stages of industrial development. It reflects India's strengths in manufacturing and pharma, and Kenya's strengths in agriculture and natural resources, at least at that point in time. It gives you a snapshot of their respective economic structures and advantages within the specific trade dynamic.
Okay, that paints a clear picture. But trade isn't just about goods moving. There are financial aspects, legal frameworks.
Absolutely. And you need the right environment for trade and investment to really flourish. A key piece mentioned is the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, the DTAA, from 1989.
Right, the DTAA. Why is that so important? What problem is it solving?
It solves the problem of, well, double taxation. Imagine an Indian company operating in Kenya. Without a DTAA, its profits could potentially get taxed by Kenya and then taxed again by India when the money comes home.
Yeah, that doesn't sound appealing at all. Would
Yeah.
definitely put companies off.
For sure. It hikes up the cost, reduces profit, acts as a major barrier. A DTAA fixes that by setting clear rules on who gets to tax what kind of income, or it provides ways to get credit for taxes paid in the other country. It brings predictability and fairness, which is crucial for encouraging businesses to invest and operate across borders.
So it basically smooths the financial path for international business. And the source mentions this 1989 treaty was actually being renegotiated more recently to adapt it.
Yeah, that's a really telling detail. It shows they recognize that the world of trade and investment has changed a lot since 1989. Think about the digital economy, e-commerce, complex multinational structures.
Ah, so the renegotiation would be about updating it for things like digital services taxation, transfer pricing rules, maybe aligning with newer international standards to stop companies dodging taxes.
Exactly that kind of thing.
Okay.
Making sure the tax rules keep up with how business is actually done now. It shows they're committed to keeping the financial plumbing of the relationship modern and effective, preventing problems that could hinder business.
Makes sense, keeping the framework current. Now, beyond the rules, India was also providing direct financial support.
Yes, the source mentions India extending lines of credit to Kenya for development.
What exactly is a line of credit in this context? Is it just a loan?
It's a form of financial aid, yeah. The Indian government, or maybe its Export-Import Bank, makes funds available to the Kenyan government. But it's often for specific projects or purchases that both sides agree on.
And are these usually tied to buying stuff from India?
Often, yes. Government lines of credit are frequently tied or partially tied, meaning the money has to be spent on goods, services, or expertise from India.
Ah, so it helps Kenya develop, but it also helps Indian businesses get export contracts.
Exactly. It's development assistance, but it also stimulates India's own economy. It serves both countries' interests in a way.
Okay, that's clear. Now, shifting gears, slightly investment in people. Education links.
Yeah, this is really important for the long term. India actively invites Kenyan students to study in India and offers quite a lot of scholarships. The source specifically mentions the ITEC program, Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation, and other cultural programs too.
And why is that focus on education so significant?
It builds deep, lasting connections. It helps Kenya develop its own human capital. People return with new skills, qualifications, maybe in tech, engineering, medicine, whatever they studied in India.
And they also have firsthand experience of India.
Exactly. They understand the culture, the systems, they build networks there, they become professionals, maybe future leaders back in Kenya who have this personal connection. It's another layer of that bridge we talked about.
A kind of professional and intellectual bridge this time.
Yes. And it's not just general university stuff. The source adds a specific detail. India also provides a professional course for Kenyan diplomats in India.
Wow, that's very targeted. Training the people who manage the relationship from the Kenyan side?
Precisely. It's a strategic investment. You help build capacity in their foreign service, but you also give their diplomats deep exposure to India. It's foreign policy thinking, how its government works. It can lead to smoother communication, better understanding down the line.
So we're seeing all these layers. The history, the diaspora bridge, the formal trade deals, the financial links like DTAAs and credit lines, and now this investment in people through education and training. It's really quite comprehensive.
It is, and all this helps explain the next point. The significant presence of actual Indian companies operating in Kenya.
And the source explicitly links this back to the diaspora again, doesn't it? Saying their sizable presence contributes to a lot of Indian companies setting up shop there.
Yes, it reinforces that bridge idea. The diaspora's local knowledge, their networks, maybe their own businesses, just create a more welcoming environment for Indian firms. They might be partners, suppliers, employees. They reduce the risk for Indian companies going abroad.
And we get some concrete examples in the sources, right? Specific companies, specific sectors.
We do, which really helps make it tangible. In power and energy, they mention SR Energy, Reliance specifically in hydrocarbons, and Kirloskar doing power transmission equipment.
Big names. Suggests serious investment in Kenya's energy sector, which fits with infrastructure being a key area.
Absolutely. Then pharmaceuticals, Dr. Reddy and Cipla are listed.
Again, huge Indian pharma companies known globally for generics. Makes sense, given India's strength there and the trade we discussed.
Right, shows the trade is backed by corporate presence. Then automobiles, Tata, TVS, and Mahindra.
Okay, so cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, Indian vehicles are clearly visible in Kenya.
Seems so. And finally, banking, which is crucial for everything else. Central Bank of India, HDFC Bank, and Bank of India are mentioned.
Having Indian banks there must make it much easier for businesses on both sides, handling payments, getting trade finance.
Definitely. And the source adds one specific, quite telling detail about Bank of India.
What's that?
It says Bank of India has 4 branches in Kenya.
4? Wow, that's not just a token presence. That sounds like a proper retail or commercial operation.
It really does suggest a deeper commitment, doesn't it? Multiple branches imply they're not just servicing big Indian firms, but maybe also local Kenyan businesses, maybe even individuals. It points to a pretty significant level of financial integration, supporting trade and investment on the ground. That detail says a lot.
Yeah, it really does. Little facts painting a bigger picture. Okay, and speaking of specific sectors, the sources zoom in on pharmacy as a particularly hot area for Indian investment.
Yes, pharmacy is definitely highlighted. There was an Indian Engineering Expo in Nairobi in 2015, and apparently a lot of Indian firms expressed their desire to invest in 3 core sectors. The source doesn't detail all 3, but it really digs into why pharmacy was so attractive.
Okay, so what were the reasons driving that interest from Indian pharma companies?
Reason 1 is pretty straightforward: market demand. The source says there's tremendous scope for pharmacy supplies just within Kenya itself, a big domestic market.
Makes sense. What else?
Second reason ties into health trends. Apparently, improved life expectancy in Kenya and advancement in access to health have opened up a huge opportunity.
How so?
Well, as people live longer and get better healthcare access, you often see more chronic diseases and just generally more demand for a wider range of medicines over a longer period. And India, being the pharmacy of the developing world, known for affordable generics,
Is perfectly placed to meet that growing demand. It's a neat fit between India's capacity and Kenya's health progress.
Exactly. And then there's a third reason, which is really strategic. Kenya acts as a base to export medicines to neighboring countries. It names the DRC, Uganda, Ethiopia specifically.
Ah, the regional hub idea.
Right.
So investing in Kenya isn't just about Kenya's market. It's about accessing the whole East African region.
Precisely. For an Indian pharma company, setting up in Kenya could be a really efficient way to reach the wider East African community market and maybe even further. Use Kenya's infrastructure, its trade links with neighbors. It could be easier than trying to set up everywhere individually.
Right, leveraging Kenya's position. That makes Kenya much more attractive than its domestic market size alone might suggest.
Definitely. And the source confirms this thinking, saying many Indian companies in pharmacy are hopeful of exploring business elsewhere through Kenya. It highlights Kenya's strategic value as that regional launchpad.
That pharmacy case study really clarifies the mix of factors: domestic demand, health trends, and regional strategy driving investment in a key sector.
It's a great snapshot. And we see this relationship playing out at the very top levels, too. The sources talk about the Indian Prime Minister's visit in July 2016.
Right, a PM visit always signals importance, shows high-level political commitment.
Absolutely. The Indian PM visited Kenya, held talks with President Kenyatta. These visits are crucial for reviewing everything, sorting out issues, and importantly, announcing new things.
And this visit led to some specific outcomes.
It did. Another line of credit was announced, $44.95 million.
Was this one different from the general development ones?
Yeah, this one was targeted. It was specifically for assistance in small industrial development and the textile sector. So, focusing on boosting particular parts of Kenya's economy, probably areas where India felt it could offer relevant tech or expertise.
Okay, targeted support. What else came out of the visit?
Something really significant in healthcare. India committed to the development of a cancer hospital in Kenya.
Wow, that's huge. A very concrete, impactful project. Addresses a major health need that must build strong bonds.
For sure, it's health diplomacy in action, going beyond just business. The visit also touched on security. They agreed to boost maritime cooperation.
Why maritime specifically?
Well, Kenya is a maritime state, depends heavily on its ports, its sea trade, and it's also affected by piracy threats in the region.
Right, piracy in the Indian Ocean affects everyone using those shipping lanes.
Exactly. So India, with its navy and maritime security experience, can work with Kenya on things like patrols, sharing information, maybe training Kenyan maritime forces. It's a shared interest securing trade routes, regional stability.
So the cooperation extends into security too. Interesting.
Yeah. And the visit also reiterated the broader stuff, general support for Kenya's economic development and specifically for skill development, echoing those themes of education and capacity building we saw earlier.
Okay, so if we step back now and look at the whole picture, it's a relationship with so many different strands, isn't it?
It really is. We started with the history, right? The colonial roots, the Indians brought over, forming the diaspora.
Which became economically important and acts as that crucial bridge today.
Exactly. Then came the formal stuff, commercial diplomacy, the 1981 trade deal, MFN status, the Joint Trade Commission established in '83, which is still going.
We looked at what they actually trade, India's manufactured goods and pharma, Kenya's commodities,
Yeah.
and the financial architecture, the DTA being updated, the lines of credit from India.
And the people side, the scholarships for Kenyan students, the training for diplomats, building those human connections and capacity, which all feeds into the big presence of Indian companies on the ground, energy, pharma, auto, banking.
Driven by opportunities like using Kenya as that regional pharma hub we discussed.
Right. And then capped off by high-level political engagement, like the PM's 2016 visit, leading to concrete projects like the cancer hospital and agreements on things like maritime security.
Has really evolved from those colonial origins into this modern, multi-layered partnership. You've got government deals, corporate investment, human capital, history, all mixed together.
It's dynamic, it's complex, and it touches so many aspects of life in both countries.
So thinking about why this matters for someone listening, why is understanding this specific India-Kenya relationship useful?
Well, I think it's a fantastic real-world example of how international relationships actually get built. It's not just abstract theory. You see how history, migration, trade policy, aid, investment strategy, security, needs, how they all intersect and interact over time.
Yeah, it shows how countries find those areas of mutual interest, healthcare, infrastructure, security, and then build cooperation piece by piece, often over decades.
Exactly. It moves beyond just headlines to show the nuts and bolts, the different factors that create these strong ties. You see the diaspora's unique role, the sheer breadth of the economic links, from tea to turbines to tablets, and these really specific, impactful commitments like the cancer hospital or tackling piracy together.
It really demonstrates that strong relationships aren't simple or built overnight. They're complex, layered, needing continuous effort on many fronts.
It definitely paints a picture of a partnership with deep roots and seemingly a lot of potential for the future.
Okay, so that brings us to a final thought, something for you, our listeners, to chew on. Based on everything we've explored today, from the sources, the history, the diverse economic ties, the focus on health, infrastructure, skills, what do you think might be the single most significant area for growth or cooperation between India and Kenya over the next, say, 10 years? And on the flip side, what could be the biggest challenge they face in actually deepening this relationship even further? Something to think about after this deep dive.